Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Thursday, and it's February 10th. This will be our chart listing for today, and this will wrap it up for the week. No chart listings on Friday, so won't be any chart listings today. Uh, First of all, a couple of things. It's really late for I'm getting this done. I had to step out of the office early this afternoon, and I'm just now getting a chance to get back. I had some personal things that pulled me away, and it took me much longer than I expected. I almost didn't come back and do this, but then I looked at my email and noticed that the midday chart didn't post either. I had it set to post and hit post, and by the time I realized it didn't post, I was already gone. And it's scheduled. It was sitting there. I went ahead and set it out late, so I apologize. It's just really weird how the one day that I'm not here in the office, that's the day it didn't go out for some reason. And so it's just been kind of a jinx day for me. Like it's been one of those kind of days. So didn't get to trade this morning really. Only got to watch the chart for a couple of hours, and I had a bunch of distractions, and probably just because I was distracted. So probably my bad. But sorry about the midday chart. If you were looking for that and didn't find it, it was done. Should have gone out, but it didn't. And again, it's 7 o'clock, and I'm just starting this, so it's going to be a little late. And but I did want to get it out today, so. I started. Let's just get to it and get right to it. There was a lot of price action today, but there weren't a lot of trades. But we'll get to that in a minute. Here's the daily chart. You can see we had the break of this channel, and it looked like we were going to have a failure here, which we did. And you can see how it rocketed up. It ran the stops and stuff, but we didn't quite get a new high, and then we sold off really strongly. So this is just sideways stuff. It looks like we're just in another little trading range to me, and you can see it right there. And will we go lower, or will we test this support and bounce and go high? It's just it's really hard to say what we're going to do from here. I'm just not sure. It's not real clear. It just looks like we're kind of stuck going sideways here. So at some point we're going to break one way or the other and probably fail and reverse and go the other way. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if we make another leg down, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if we make another leg up. It could go either way. There's just not enough information here. There's too much undecision here, and I think that's really more fitting for this market now than to say it's really bullish or really over bearish. I think people are confused. They don't know what the market's going to do. There's a lot of things hanging over the market that could happen. You got the stuff with Russia, the Russia invasion, and are we going to sending troops over there? And so, I mean, that's probably going to drive oil to the moon if that happens. Let's hope that Russia doesn't invade over there. But anyway, um, we just got all the negativity with the economy and things like that. It's just inflation, and I think that is lending towards this being indecision versus a failure down or a failure up. I think people are just afraid to buy, and people don't know whether to sell anymore. We had a pretty good sell off. So that's what I'm leaning towards at this point. At some point we're going to go one way or the other. We'll just have to wait and see, but this looks like indecision right here. People don't know what to do. So let's stop here, or let's flip over here to the 2000 tick intraday chart, and we'll go through the trades real quick. Okay, here we are, and you can see this is at a real high level. You can see we had this big, huge sell-off. And if you caught one of these moves, that's all you needed for the day. I mean, there was hardly no price action at all until 7 o'clock, and then boom, the bottom falls out of it. Um, and then we rallied back, took it all back, and then we started down again. So it looked like it might be a range day, but we went right on through those lows, and we bounced a little bit, but it just continued to head lower. And so I would be looking for a measured leg down, um, just like this leg right here. And that was the high point. It looks like it really took a measurement from there. But generally it's going to be up here. So, I mean, this is just not, I mean, really, I think that's where you got to measure from, because that's how we teach you to do it. And 90% of the time, or probably 99% of the time, that's where you're going to get your measured leg from. So you just really can't start down here. So anyway, what you could do, if you want to measure from there, you measure this leg, and then you'd look from here. And you can see that was a pretty much a measured leg and where we corrected from, but then the selling came back in and off we go again. And then of course I'd measure that leg and look for a measured leg down from there, and that gives you another great target down here about where this tried to bounce across here before it went lower again. And if you measured that next one, it's probably going to be real similar. We got 3 of them, so I think this falls back to the indecision and the market not knowing what it's wanting to do. So, but anyway, let's back out. There's not a whole lot of trades here today. I mean, there's a lot of movement not to have any more trades than we got, but the ones we do have here are really good trades. So, fairly easy to spot, and then there's some nice runners. And I haven't had a chance to look into it, but a trader texted me today, or not texted me, I'm sorry, he emailed me and said that he had 2 ticks of slippage in the ES. It's not impossible, especially on a volatile day like this, to get some slippage, but I don't remember seeing 2 ticks. He did send me the price level, so if anybody wants to comment on the videos, or if that trader's watching, you can look in the comments and see if anybody else says anything. I usually don't read the comments here. I don't have time. So, but anyway, if you want to post some in the comments and he's watching, he can take a look and y'all can communicate that way. And if anybody wants to email me, if you had some slippage today, anything unusual. Like I said, I didn't really end up getting a trade but a couple hours early this morning, and I just didn't have a chance to really do much today. So I didn't get to watch the chart very much. So I mean, even watching it, you probably wouldn't see slippage, even if it's real volatile. But it's definitely volatile. This was a really strong rally back up, and then we sold off, kind of went sideways, sold off again, kind of went sideways, sold off again, and just kind of chopped our way down. But let me get to the trades because it's really late here and I want to get this done and posted. So I'm going to try to keep this one short and sweet. But early on, it didn't look like we were having much happening today. I mean, it's just really, really small price action early on. But notice we were in this range. Look how flat the EMA is. And then we turn down off the highs. We break higher and make a higher low and turn down. You could go short way down here, but that means that's like a 30 tick bar. I probably would trade this on the engulfing bar, knowing that they probably got traders trapped. And you don't, and you're looking for it just to come to here. You don't know that this is coming. But, once you start to get down in here, at the very least, at least only move your stop to high of the last bar. And you might just go ahead and put your target down here. I mean, you still, even if you only got that amount right there, I mean, you still got 10 points on a runner if you got out in front of that. And you see it did bounce, and that probably scares a lot of people out. And that's what that is. It's just profit taking right there. And there's also buyers that come in because we bounced over here before, and they're thinking it's going to bounce again. But if you ride this thing all the way down, even if you just rode it down to, let's just say you got the first bar that closed outside and a break above it, here's your 31 points. Right out of the gate this morning before the market that's still a full hour before the regular session opens, and you're done. So that's what we're trying. That's your goal, to try to catch one of these moves with a runner, and that's just with one contract. Imagine if you've got a couple of 3 for people that trade a little more. So, but anyway, we move on down here. We get the first closeout. So notice how we overshot it a little bit. That's a sign that eventually you're going to get a break here. And it's not long. We get the break, and you got there's actually 2 legs back right there. So it's tempting to go short right there, but it looks like that's the first close outside of that little channel to me. And then we tried to go higher and make a lower high. I like entering right there because that's a very strong trend, and there's a good chance we could get another leg down right here as well. And if you measure that, I don't think we quite got a measured leg, but let's just measure it and see where that takes us to. You can see, and generally if you don't make that target, you miss it by a good bit, then you can see it means you're going to usually rally real hard in the other direction, and that's what happened. So, but we drop on down here, and we just kind of go sideways, and I don't see any real entries here that you could take. This has a 2-bar matching high, but it didn't break higher, so you couldn't really trade it when it went past. You got to wait for this to close, and that's just too far down. You don't want to go short right into that support because we've already got a break and a new low of this channel. And that's all you got at that point. So it does drop on down. Again, I don't see any trades here. And then we're just kind of working sideways. There's a good bit of resistance here. And this has been a strong trend, but notice we try to go higher once, twice. I'd count all that together. And then it finally pushed on down and came back. I mean, you got multiple tests in there. But you can see the congestion too. So I'm a little hesitant with that. The other thing is it's a first entry, second entry. And so with it being a second entry and a triple test and fairly small bar, it's fairly bullish, although it's still got a little stem, but I think it probably closes close enough to its third. And for today, so far, that's been a fairly small bar at 14 ticks. So, you may or may not take that trade. I don't know if it's worth taking, but there's some reasons to consider it. I marked it green. And it doesn't really even look it in there, but believe it or not, there's probably 3 points down to that low point. So that's because this thing is super crazy today. If when you back out like that, you can see you can see it. I had it scrunched up a little too much. When we bounce out of there, unfortunately, that's not a failure because that's a nice looking trade. There's a little congestion, so I didn't mark it. Failure comes here. You could, I mean, that's another one you could argue for green, for it to be at least green, but I'm not because it didn't get back to the EMA. I don't think it's worth fooling with, so I think you're better off to wait. Then we just kind of chop around. There's a triple test in here, but the signal bar is no good, and there is a trend line working up. You wouldn't have had the yellow one yet. All you have is the green one at this point. Of course, we get a close outside. You might look at that as a double bottom. It's not quite down there, but you could still look at that, and then you get a first entry, second entry. I was thinking it was the third entry, but it's not. It broke lower right there, so you couldn't even look at it like a third entry. So it's not a failure or anything. You actually make a new low right here, and that's an inside bar. So runs on up, then you just kind of, you get an overshoot here again, and that usually means you got a break coming soon. I didn't draw it, but there's a, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't draw it, but there's a little channel right across there. I don't know how I did that a minute ago. I don't know why I did that. Mostly sideways here. You get a little failed break higher, but you can't trade this back. You would be looking to go short. That right there is a doji, but it's right off the trend line and the support line, and it's 6 ticks. We're not getting many entries here, so if you took that, it's probably low risk. It might be worth considering. I mean, notice that we've tested that multiple times, and it's right off the key entry point there. Although we do already have a break down here, but that's not a very convincing break, and it could be that this is just a little bit lower, like so. That's probably more like it. And then this is just an overshoot up here. Yeah, that looks a little better. So you got to be careful with those, but it's something to consider. Drop down first entry, then second entry. I don't like that being below the EMA with not being a really strong signal bar. So, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of movement here, but not many setups. And we hit the top, and then we come across here, and we just start going sideways again. But notice you test it once, twice, 3 times. So you got a triple test there. So you may take that trade right there. It's a fairly decent signal bar on a triple test right at the EMA, proven support right across there. And then it comes back and does the same thing again. This actually should be right there. And you get an even better bar. So I like going long there. I mean, this has been a strong trend. It doesn't look like it, but that's that. Notice how you're getting all those little bars with stems, and not the corrections are very shallow and they don't go very deep or anything. It runs on up, and we finally get a break of the yellow channel, and there's a possibility of the blue one drawing it off those first 2 swings. But at this point, all we have is the yellow one, and the blue one, you can see the midline coming in there, so there's a chance it's valid, but it's got to get confirmed. And of course, you get this first break of this yellow one, so we're moving down, and then you get a low there, and you get a 1, 2. You really might could argue that this was a triple test, but that looks a little too congested. But then it makes a little higher low and makes another test, and that looks like all one test really. So triple test, and that's, you could also cause, look at that. This is a double bottom, try to go higher once, twice, a failed second entry short. But generally when you're going sideways like that, don't count the failures and second entries and things. So just kind of forget I just said that, because you really don't want to count them then. But you do have a break and a new low already. And then you make a higher low after on a triple test, quadruple test, whatever you want to call it. There is a failure right here too. If you could almost argue for that to be a double bottom, and then the first entry, second entry, but that's too congested. Just skip over that. Here's one I missed this one. You could take this trade too. Notice the new high, and there's a first entry, second entry, bounces right off, and that's a fairly bullish bar. It's a little congested, but there's enough room there, so you could take that trade. I kind of looked at that one and looked at it and couldn't make up my mind, and I forgot to go ahead and mark it. But you could take that as a second entry. If I was trading that in real time, on a day like today, when this is a real strong trend up, I'd probably take it. And you can see it turns out to be a nice trade. There's a higher low right here, but I don't know if I'd take that or not. It's a pretty good signal bar. It's off this trend line, but you really wouldn't have that trend line confirmed yet. You need a couple more touches of it. So, I mean, that's like the first swing back. So you can't really go with that trend line I got up through there. You could only go with, you just have to treat it as a higher low, and it's not much room there. It's right into that midline. Most of you probably wouldn't have that yet. You might have had it because there are the two swings there. But I don't know, a lot of the newer traders may not quite know how to find a channel that early. But so I just skipped that one. It runs on up, and then it starts correcting. You get a first entry, second entry. This is just, I like this second entry. It's clearly 2 legs down, and this is a strong trend. We didn't make the high, but we're back below the EMA in the midline, and that's not a good sign, because that probably means you're going lower. And I don't have it drawn, but there's a shorter term trend line, and everything's inside that. So I wouldn't take that trade, even though it works. And it actually looks like a failure, but I wouldn't take a failure yet either on this side of the EMA. This is very tempting to go long and short, but I wouldn't take either one of them. Runs down, and this is where we would expect the bounce to happen. It looks like prices might bounce here and confirm this blue channel. I think the blue channel is correct, but it never really confirms and holds, and prices just go lower. And so, of course, you draw this channel just in case, and it looks like it's going to hold, and you just get a first entry there. But once after you get the break, then you get 2 more legs to a new high. This first one would be tempting too, but you sometimes get 2 legs, so you got to be careful taking that short. If you took that one, you probably got burned. If you did, I'd hop right back in right here. So you can clearly see the 2-legged move there after the break, and then it just rockets down again. There's a lower high here. You may take that trade too, but the trend has been strong up, and there's some support across here, and that's congestion. So I'd skip that trade and wait and see if you get a reversal, which you get right here. I'm sorry, somebody called me like 6 times in a row there, so I had to answer that. But you get that failed second entry long there with that huge bar. That's just hard to pass up when you're working this downtrend here. And this was a confirmed trend, but you got your break there. But you're probably still going to push on down with, I mean, that's just so bearish with a failed second entry long there. You run down, and then you just, there's another little bit of a trap here, but that's just too congested. And then you finally make that new low, and then it bounces out of there, and it just runs up and starts going sideways. I mean, it's starting to look like indecision here. It's hard to, the market doesn't know what to do. There's no clear direction. It still has a downward. Well, actually, at this point, I would say that this erased your downward bias, and so now you just kind of have a neutral. Look how it looks like a roller coaster back and forth above and below the EMA. So you got to be real careful. So we're just kind of working sideways. I don't see any longs down here that I like, and that's the first short. Notice that you got that you bounced here, and then you got your resistance up here, and you broke out. Generally, you want to wake on a lower high, but then you break higher. There's actually, I didn't draw the trend channels, but there's a little trend working up there. You get a close outside, move to a new low, and look at that big bearish bar that closes back inside, and it broke higher first. Guaranteed they trapped the longs. And you just want to look to ride it down to here, and maybe it keeps going, but that's an easy move. It bounces, and unfortunately, you don't get another chance before the big move happens. And then this is too congested here, too much support to go short right there. Drops on down, and it should start working back. It looks like it gets an overshoot here. It's hard to say if this one just came up short. This one may have just come up short here, and I may not have this drawn correctly. It may be just a little lower like so. Yep, that's probably it, because now you can see your midline fits a little better. So, and you just came up short right here. So, drops on down pretty strongly, and then we bounce back to the other side, and it works more sideways than it does up. And notice you made a couple of tests here, and you made a third test here, but I'm not crazy about that one, even though it's right on the EMA. I'm sorry, right off the key. What might be the, actually you wouldn't have the key entry point, so that's the reason I didn't like that one, because that's fairly bearish, and you've already had your break and 2 legs up, but you would have just drawn your trend line there, and then it just makes another high, and this is kind of working sideways, so you don't know that this yellow channel's here yet, is what I'm getting at. So, but after making all those tests in that big bearish bar, I like taking that short. But a few minutes later, you get the lower high, and then it kind of confirms that trend line. Even though you got a little break higher right there, you still could argue that that's confirming that trend line, and you may take that on down lower. And then you just kind of go sideways. You get a failed breakout at the bottom, failed breakout at the top, and then it turns lower again. And that's what will happen a lot of times. It'll fail out one side and then reverse and then fail out the other before it'll go in the direction it wants to go. And generally when you trade down into whichever way you trade into a little range like this, generally that's going to determine which way it's going to succeed on a breakout. Now it might have a couple of failures both ways, but when it succeeds, it usually will be, so we traded down into this, so you would expect it to fail and trade down out of it. Hopefully that makes sense. So we drop on down here. I just don't see any entries down here that, I mean, there's just no good setups. Again, this is a really strong trend down, but you don't even get any good signal bars. And then next thing you know, it's bouncing. Comes back to this yellow channel. And again, we only bounces so far and it starts working sideways. I mean, you can't go short there. This one's too close to the lows. And finally it breaks out, fails, runs down. You get a first entry, second entry. Now you got a failed second entry long right at the key entry point. It's also a second entry short. You couldn't qualify to go short there on a second entry short because that signal bar is too neutral. And that does look a little congested, but it's still 2 legs back when you're expecting prices to go lower. So you may take that one. It's a little aggressive because of the congestion right there, but really it's probably congested because prices are trying to go higher and can't, and they're probably going to go lower. There's another lower high here, but you got to go short right into that, or then you got to use that for the signal bar, and you can't do that. So just, again, a lot of good movement here with not many good setups. And then, of course, and when it bounces, look what it does. It always rockets up. There's a little spiking channel up off. It turns out there's the blue channel there. We were still playing the end of the yellow one, but sometimes they're too steep and then they'll flatten out. And there's still a downward bias until we get something that reverses out of here. And so luckily you don't get, I mean, you don't get any kind of reversal pattern, so you can't go long. That's too congested. This is just, people don't know what to do here. But you come back to that blue trend line and you get a first entry, second entry. So when it breaks lower there, it fails. And you really kind of got a triple test. So you might go short there. I'm not crazy about it, but if this channel, blue channel, is valid, which it looks very valid by this point, you're probably going to the other side. Actually, it comes up short before it rallies back up, and there is a reversal here, but in this downtrend, I'm not crazy about taking it. It's another one you could argue, but notice you got a new low there, and you get a first entry, and then you run up and you get a second entry right at the, I mean, it sets up like a really nice reversal, but in a downtrend, this is strong. Sometimes they'll fool you, so just be careful with that. And of course, this channel continues to work up. It gets a break, moves to a new high right off the key entry point. You're probably better to wait on a lower high, but you may not get it the way this market's been going. So I like that trade. You could also call that a failed break out of that little congestion area. The fact that it's so bearish and turns down, you may not even got in it because it just gaps and keeps going. There's no notice there's no overlap on those. It closes on its low, the next one opens on its high and just takes off. That's a good sign that they probably got them trapped. So that leads me to say you might take this one since it broke higher and then turned and went. It's an engulfing bar. I don't think I'd wait here and go short. I'd trade it on the engulfing and go short one tick below that just to be sure. And you would have got on out of that, but you see it's not long before it comes back, and that got you into 2 o'clock. There's actually another little second entry here, but if you this late in the day, right there at 2:30, with the fact that this came up short, and then we're not taking off again, and we're kind of chopping sideways, I'd be very careful. Even though there's a, I mean, you could count this as a double bottom and say, hey, you got a first entry, second entry. But this is a little higher than this. So technically, by our counts, it's a first entry, second entry, third entry. But, you know, on a good downtrend, I wouldn't have a problem counting that as a second entry and taking it. But if you took it here, I don't know if it broke lower and then went higher, or if it broke higher and then went lower. So it's one of those engulfing bars. So if you took this, this came up the other day. If you took this, just assume it broke lower right there and then turned up. If you still like the trade, your stop has to go above the last swing, which would be way up here, and then you would go short. Or I'm sorry, and then you'd wait till this closed, and then you'd put your stop just above it. You don't know where this bar is going to close at as an engulfing bar. That's the problem. So they're real convoluted, but if you take a trade entry on an engulfing bar, always move your stop to the previous swing high if you're short, and as soon as this one closes, then move it one tick above that bar. I hope that makes sense. And then that took us into 2:30, and so it's still 27 minutes here. So I'm going to wrap this up, folks. I'm sorry. It's going to be real late before it gets up. Most of you may not even want to watch it by this point. Again, apologize about the mid-morning chart. I screwed up there somehow. I don't know why it didn't post. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up. We'll be back. Tomorrow's Friday, so no chart lesson. We'll be back Monday. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next.